The battlefield was silent. The silence was heavy, almost unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Smoke curled upward from broken alien ships. Shattered metal and blackened stones stretched across the land. Fires still burned in the distance, glowing faintly against the cold sky. The human walked carefully through the ruins. His boots pressed into the dust, each step slow, careful, alert. He had seen many battlefields in his life. He had heard screams, explosions, and the sound of weapons tearing through flesh and steel. Yet this place felt different. This place felt like the end of something greater. He tightened his grip on his small pack. There was little inside. A water can, a few rations, and a single emergency light. Enough for survival, but not for long. He had no real reason to stay here, but something in his heart told him to keep moving forward. The air was thick, hard to breathe. The smell of burned metal mixed with the sharp scent of blood. His eyes scanned the ruins. Every shadow looked like danger. Every echo felt like a threat. Then he heard it. A sound that made him stop instantly. It was soft, almost hidden under the wind. A small cry. Weak, broken, trembling. He froze, listening. His pulse quickened. The sound came again. Not an echo. Not his imagination. A child. He followed the faint noise, stepping over broken beams and collapsed walls. The cry grew clearer, and so did his fear. What kind of child could survive here, in this place of death? His heart pounded as he turned a corner. There, in the shadows of a ruined wall, he saw her. The child was small, curled against a pile of shattered stone. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, glowing faintly under the dim light. Her body was thin, fragile, as if the weight of the world was too much for her. Her eyes opened slowly, wide and bright, glowing with an unnatural shimmer. She looked at him with fear, with hunger, with a silent plea. He stepped closer, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. The child flinched, pressing herself back into the wall. "It is all right," he whispered softly. His voice trembled. "I will not hurt you." The words meant nothing to her. She did not speak his language. Yet she understood his tone. She understood the kindness in his voice. Slowly, he reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar. He opened it carefully and placed it on the ground, pushing it toward her. The child's eyes followed the food. Her lips trembled. She hesitated for only a moment, then crawled forward with shaky arms and grabbed it. She tore into the bar with desperate hunger, devouring it as if it was the first food she had tasted in days. Tears formed in her eyes as she ate. She looked at him again, but this time her fear was weaker. In its place, there was something else. Trust. He knelt beside her, watching her carefully. His heart ached. He had seen many strange beings across the stars. Some were enemies. Some were allies. But this child was neither. She was simply a child, starving and alone. The world around them remained silent, yet his instincts screamed. Something was wrong. This child was not alone. Someone would be looking for her. Then the ground shook. A deep rumble rolled through the ruins, shaking broken walls and sending dust into the air. He stood quickly, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. The child clung to the remains of her meal, eyes wide with fear. The sound grew louder, closer. Heavy footsteps. Machines or soldiers? He could not tell. But he knew one thing. Whoever they were, they would not be friendly to a human holding one of their children. His mind raced. He had no time to think. He had no plan. Only instinct. He bent down, scooped the child into his arms, and pulled her close. She gasped in surprise but did not resist. Her tiny hands clutched his jacket tightly. He ran. His boots struck the broken ground as he searched for cover. The footsteps grew louder. A searchlight beam cut across the ruins, sweeping side to side, hunting. He dove behind the wreckage of a fallen ship, pressing his back against the cold metal. The child's small body trembled in his arms. He whispered softly, trying to calm her, though his own heart thundered in his chest. The beam of light passed close, so close that he held his breath. He dared not move. The sound of alien voices echoed through the ruins. Harsh, sharp, commanding. The patrol was near. He pressed the child closer, shielding her with his body. He could feel her heart racing against his chest. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with both fear and hope. The voices grew distant. The light faded. The footsteps moved away, leaving only silence once again. He exhaled slowly, relief flooding through him. But he knew this was not the end. He had been seen. Someone knew he was here. The child buried her face into his chest, holding on as if he was her only safety. He held her tighter, knowing his life had just changed. This was no longer his mission. This was no longer about survival. This was about her. And he had no idea what danger was waiting for them next. The ruins felt alive with danger. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was sharp, like the edge of a blade. The human pressed his back against the wreckage and held the child close. His breath came fast, but he forced himself to stay quiet. The patrol was still near. He could hear their steps echoing through the broken stone, heavy and deliberate. The child's glowing eyes looked up at him, wide with fear. Her small body trembled in his arms. He placed a finger on his lips, trying to show her that she must remain silent. She seemed to understand. She buried her face against his chest, her small hands clutching his jacket. The searchlight swept over the ruins again. It passed across the ship's hull, then stopped. The beam held steady for a moment, and he felt his chest tighten. Were they seen? His hand gripped his weapon, ready to fight if he had no other choice. The light moved on. The patrol began to speak in their alien tongue. The voices were harsh, filled with anger, but also with a strange urgency. He did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were looking for someone important. They were searching for the child. He stayed hidden until the voices grew softer. The footsteps moved further away. The silence returned, but he did not relax. This was no ordinary patrol. These soldiers would not stop searching. He glanced down at the child. Her face was pale, but her breathing was calmer now. He reached into his pack and pulled out his water can. He opened it and held it near her lips. At first, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she took a sip. Water ran down her chin as she drank eagerly. He wiped her face gently with his sleeve. "You are safe," he whispered softly, though he knew the words meant little to her. Still, his voice carried warmth. She seemed to understand the kindness, if not the meaning. Her eyes blinked slowly, as if she wanted to believe him. He stayed crouched in the shadows, listening carefully. When he was sure the patrol had moved away, he lifted the child again. She was light, far too light for someone her age. Hunger had drained her strength. He moved through the ruins, each step careful and silent. The fires in the distance lit the way faintly, but the path was dangerous. Broken beams jutted out like claws. Pools of black liquid reflected the sky. The ground shook lightly with each distant explosion. The war was not far from here. The child whimpered softly, clutching his jacket. He stopped and crouched beside a broken wall. "Shh," he whispered, stroking her back gently. "Quiet. Just a little more." Suddenly, a noise cut through the silence. A mechanical hum. His blood froze. A drone. The machine floated into view, its sensors scanning the wreckage. A bright red beam of light swept across the ground. The drone's body glowed with alien energy, its weapons armed and ready. The human pressed himself against the wall, pulling the child close to his chest. The drone's beam moved closer, scanning, searching. The child's body stiffened with fear. He could feel her trembling. He closed his eyes for a moment, his mind racing. If the drone spotted them, it would call the patrol. They would be surrounded in seconds. He had to act. He had to take the risk. He reached down to his pack and pulled out a small metal shard. A piece of broken alien tech he had picked up earlier. He tossed it across the ruins with a sharp flick of his wrist. The shard clattered against a pile of stone. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet night. The drone's sensors turned instantly toward the noise. Its beams swept away from their hiding place. The human used the moment. He sprinted low across the ground, carrying the child in his arms. His boots struck the dirt softly but quickly. His lungs burned as he ran, but he did not stop. The drone shifted its beam back, but by then he had already slipped behind another wall. He pressed his back against it, his breath heavy, his heart pounding. The child's arms tightened around his neck. The drone hovered in the distance, scanning, searching. Then it moved toward the sound of the shard. After a tense moment, it drifted away, disappearing into the smoke. Relief washed over him, but it was brief. The danger was not gone. He knew the patrol would not give up. They were still out there. Watching. Hunting. He carried the child deeper into the ruins, until he found a small hollow under a collapsed tower. It was dark and narrow, but it would hide them for now. He set the child down gently. She leaned against the stone, her small chest rising and falling quickly. He knelt in front of her. His eyes softened as he looked at her face. She was fragile, but her glowing eyes still carried strength. She had survived this long. That meant she was stronger than she looked. He took another ration from his pack and broke it into smaller pieces. He handed them to her one by one, watching her eat carefully this time, not as desperate as before. When she finished, she looked at him quietly. For a moment neither spoke. Then, slowly, she reached out her small hand and touched his wrist. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. She trusted him now. The human's heart tightened. He was a soldier, trained to fight and survive, not to protect children. Yet in this moment he knew. Protecting her had become more important than any mission he had ever been given. Outside, the ruins groaned under the weight of the night. The patrol was still searching. The danger was not over. But something new had begun. This was no longer about survival. It was about keeping a promise he had never spoken out loud. The promise to keep her alive. And nothing would stop him from doing it. The night was deep and restless. The ruins stretched like a graveyard, silent yet full of unseen eyes. The human sat close to the small fire he had made inside the hollow of broken stone. The flames were faint, just enough to give warmth but not enough to be seen from afar. The child slept beside him, her thin body curled up against a folded piece of cloth he had laid under her. He watched her carefully as she slept. Every rise and fall of her chest was a small relief. She had eaten and drunk water. She had stopped trembling. For now, she was safe. But his instincts refused to rest. Danger pressed against the night like a storm waiting to break. He tightened his hand around the grip of his weapon. His ears strained for every sound. The wind whistled softly through the broken metal towers. Ash drifted in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a faint roar shook the ground. Perhaps a battle, perhaps another patrol. He did not know. Then he felt it. The sensation of being watched. His breath slowed. His eyes scanned the shadows. He saw nothing, yet every part of him screamed that something was there. Something was close. The fire flickered. He rose to his feet quietly, his weapon ready. He stepped out from the hollow, his boots crunching softly against the dirt. The night was cold, and the silence felt sharp. Behind him, the child stirred in her sleep but did not wake. He moved a little further, searching the darkness with tense eyes. Then a figure appeared. From the edge of the ruins, a tall shape stepped into view. The human froze. His heart thundered. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. A tall alien woman, her armor catching the faint glow of the fire. The design was elegant yet deadly, dark metal carved with lines of silver light. Her movements were graceful, but every step carried the strength of a warrior. Her eyes burned like stars, sharp and piercing, locking directly onto him. For a long moment neither moved. The ruins seemed to hold its breath. The woman stopped a few steps away. She looked at him, then past him, toward the hollow where the child slept. Her face, though marked with battle scars, softened in an instant. The child stirred again, opening her glowing eyes. When she saw the tall figure, she let out a weak cry. Not of fear, but of recognition. The woman's lips trembled. She dropped to her knees, her strong hands shaking as she reached forward. Her voice broke the silence, filled with emotion. "That is my daughter." The words struck him like a blade. His hand tightened on his weapon. His heart pounded harder. The child crawled out of the hollow, moving weakly across the ground. She reached for the woman, her small arms trembling. The mother pulled her close instantly, holding her with desperate strength. Tears ran down the alien woman's face as she pressed her forehead against the child's. The human stood still, his breath uneven. His instincts told him to run, to fight, to prepare for betrayal. Yet another part of him, deeper and stronger, told him something else. This was not an enemy moment. This was something sacred. The woman looked up at him again. Her sharp eyes were wet with tears, yet filled with power. She studied him, as if searching for something hidden in his soul. "You gave her food," she said slowly. Her voice was low but steady. "You kept her alive." He said nothing. His throat felt dry. He did not lower his weapon, but he did not raise it either. "In my people's law," she continued, her voice heavy with meaning, "a life saved is a bond. A child saved is a blood tie." Her hand touched the child's head gently. The little girl clung to her mother's armor, safe at last. "You are no longer a stranger," the woman said. Her words carried weight, as if carved in stone. "You are part of us now." The human's chest tightened. He had not asked for this. He had only acted because he could not leave a starving child to die. Yet here, in the eyes of this alien woman, his act had changed everything. The fire crackled softly between them. The ruins stood silent, but the air was heavy with new tension. The woman rose to her feet, still holding the child in one arm. She stepped closer to him. Her presence was overwhelming, both dangerous and strangely beautiful. Her voice lowered, almost like a whisper meant only for him. "You risked your life for her. That makes you more than a savior." Her eyes held his, unblinking, filled with both gratitude and something unspoken. "It makes you family." The human's heart pounded. He felt the weight of her words press deep into him. He had no answer, no way to refuse, no way to understand what path had just opened before him. The child rested her head on her mother's shoulder, her glowing eyes closing again with peace. The mother stroked her back gently, then looked at him once more. "You do not know what this means," she said softly. "But you will." The night wind moved through the ruins, carrying ash across the broken land. The human lowered his weapon slowly. His eyes stayed locked on hers. And in that silent moment, he realized his life would never be the same. The fire had nearly burned out. Only soft embers glowed, painting the ruins in a faint red light. The human stood across from the alien woman, his weapon lowered but not forgotten. She held her child close, rocking her gently in her arms. The child's glowing eyes were half closed, safe at last in her mother's embrace. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. The human felt the weight of her gaze. Strong, sharp, but also softened by gratitude. He had seen many warriors in his life, but never one who looked at him with such intensity. Finally, the woman spoke. Her voice was low, steady, and filled with something deeper than thanks. "My daughter was lost. My patrol thought she was gone. But you found her. You fed her. You carried her." She paused, her hand stroking the child's fragile hair. "In my people's law, this is not a small act. This is sacred." The human stayed silent, unsure what to say. His chest rose and fell heavily. He had not saved the child for honor or reward. He had saved her because she was small, starving, and helpless. But the woman's words carried a power that went beyond his understanding. She took a step closer. The embers lit the edges of her armor, silver lines glowing faintly. Her eyes shone with tears she no longer tried to hide. "You must understand," she continued, her tone firm. Among my people, to save a child is to bind your soul to the family. It is not a choice. It is a truth. The human's breath caught. His mind raced. He wanted to argue, to explain that he was only a wanderer, a survivor, nothing more. But when he looked at the child sleeping against her mother's shoulder, the words died in his throat. The little girl trusted him. She had eaten from his hand. She had clung to his jacket. She had placed her tiny fingers on his wrist as if claiming him. That bond could not be denied. The mother lowered herself to one knee, still holding her daughter. She placed her weapon on the ground before her. The gesture was clear. She was showing him respect. You are no longer an outsider to us, she said softly. You are part of my bloodline now. And I must honor that bond. The human stared at her, stunned. His heart pounded so hard he felt it in his throat. He had never imagined this moment. In all the battles he had fought, in all the losses he had endured, he had never thought a single act of kindness would carry such weight. The woman rose again, taller, stronger, but her voice carried a gentleness he had not heard before. You risked everything for my daughter. And so, by our law, you are no longer only a savior. You are a protector. You are bound to her. And to me. The last words echoed in his mind. To me. The ruins were silent, but inside him there was a storm. He did not know this woman. He did not know her people or her culture. Yet the way she looked at him carried no doubt. To her, this was already decided. She stepped closer again. Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. He could feel the strength in her presence. A warrior. A mother. A leader. And now, something more. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with words, she said. In my world, the only way to repay such a bond is through life itself. To stand beside you. To share my strength. To make you part of my future. The human's chest tightened. The meaning was clear. She was not only thanking him. She was claiming him. The child stirred and opened her glowing eyes again. She looked at the human, then at her mother, then reached a tiny hand toward both of them. The simple gesture carried more weight than words. She had already chosen. The mother pressed her forehead gently against the child's. Her voice broke with emotion as she whispered to the little one, then looked back at the human. You may not understand this now, she said quietly, her voice almost trembling. But you are hers. And because of that, you are mine. The human swallowed hard. His throat was dry. He could not find words. His instincts screamed to resist, to run, to protect himself. But his heart whispered something different. He remembered the fear in the child's eyes when he first found her. He remembered the trust she had shown when she took food from his hand. He remembered the way she had clung to him as he carried her through danger. And now, her mother stood before him, offering him not just thanks, but a place in their lives. He felt a strange warmth inside, mixed with fear, mixed with hope. He had been alone for so long. A soldier, a survivor, drifting from one battlefield to another. But now, for the first time, someone was telling him he was needed. Someone was telling him he belonged. The fire's last ember cracked softly. The wind carried ash across the ruins. The moment was fragile, but powerful. The human lowered his weapon completely and let it rest at his side. He did not speak, but his silence was an answer. The woman gave a slow nod, her eyes never leaving his. A small smile touched her lips for the first time. The child yawned softly and leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, her glowing eyes closing again. The mother stroked her daughter's hair gently, then looked at the human once more. It is decided, she whispered. From this night forward, our paths are one. The human felt the words settle deep in his chest. He knew the dangers ahead would be great. The patrols were still hunting. The war was still raging. But he also knew something else. He was no longer alone. And that truth was stronger than any fear. The dawn came slowly. Pale light stretched across the ruins, touching the broken metal and shattered towers. The human awoke first. His body was tired, but his senses were sharp. He had learned long ago that danger never truly slept. Beside him, the alien child rested against her mother's chest. The woman sat with her back against the cracked wall, her eyes half closed. She looked peaceful, but he could see she had stayed awake through most of the night, watching over them both. When their eyes met, she gave him a small nod. No words, just quiet understanding. They began their journey at sunrise. The patrols would return, and staying in one place meant death. The human carried his pack, while the woman carried her daughter. Together they moved through the broken land. The path was not easy. Fallen beams blocked their way. Ash fell from the sky like slow rain. The sound of distant battles rumbled through the earth. Each step reminded them of how close danger truly was. But there were also moments of silence. Moments where the world felt almost calm. At midday, they stopped near the remains of an old structure. The human pulled food from his pack and shared it. He gave small pieces to the child first, then handed another to her mother. She accepted it slowly, her eyes studying him with quiet curiosity. "You could have left her," she said finally. Her voice was calm but searching. "You had no reason to stay. No duty to protect." The human looked at her, then at the child who was nibbling carefully on her food. He shook his head. "I could not." The woman's eyes lingered on him. She seemed to test his words, to measure the weight of his truth. Finally, she gave a slow nod. The child finished eating and gave a small laugh as she reached for the human's sleeve. The sound was soft, fragile, but it filled the air with unexpected warmth. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. The woman looked at her daughter with surprise, then at him. Her eyes softened. For a brief moment, the sharp lines of a warrior melted away, and only a mother remained. That night, they sat by another fire. The flames cast long shadows across the broken land. The child slept between them, wrapped in a piece of cloth. The human leaned forward, staring into the fire. Memories of his past flickered in his mind. Battles. Lost friends. Long nights where he thought he would never wake again. He had always walked alone. Yet here he was, sharing firelight with an alien child and her mother. The woman's voice broke the silence. "You are different from the stories I was told," she said quietly. "Your people are called destroyers. Ruthless. Cold. But you saved her. You saved me." The human looked up slowly. Her eyes reflected the fire, filled with something he had not seen before. Not just respect. Something softer. Something dangerous in its own way. "I am not like the others," he said simply. For a moment, they only looked at each other. The fire popped softly. The child breathed gently in her sleep. The ruins around them seemed far away. Then the woman lowered her gaze, her hand brushing gently against her daughter's hair. "In my world, a bond like this is not only law. It is life. It is a promise." Her words hung in the air. The human felt the weight of them settle into his chest. A promise. Something he had not allowed himself to make in years. The journey continued for days. Each step drew them closer, not just in distance, but in spirit. The human fought off small patrols with skill, while the woman defended their path with strength and grace. Side by side, they moved as if they had done so for years. At night, they shared stories. He told her of Earth, of blue skies and green fields, of oceans stretching further than the eye could see. She listened in silence, her sharp eyes softening as she imagined a world so different from her own. In return, she spoke of her people. A proud race, bound by honor and law. A people who believed deeply in bonds and promises. Her voice carried pride, but also sorrow, for the war had taken much from them. The child listened too, her glowing eyes wide as she drifted into dreams. She no longer cried in the night. She no longer trembled at every sound. Her laughter returned, small but bright. The human found himself watching her more than he expected. Each smile felt like a victory greater than any battle he had fought. And he found himself watching the mother too. Her strength, her calm, her quiet glances when she thought he was not looking. There was something between them now. Something unspoken, yet undeniable. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, they sat in silence. The fire crackled softly. The child slept peacefully, her small hand resting near the human's. The woman spoke without looking at him. You fight with honor. You protect with heart. My people believe such a bond is eternal. You are bound to us now, whether you accept it or not. Her words were steady, but her voice trembled slightly at the end. The human turned his eyes toward her. For the first time in many years, he felt warmth rising in his chest. Not just duty. Not just survival. Something deeper. I am beginning to understand, he said quietly. The woman looked at him then. Their eyes met across the fire. For a long moment, the ruins, the war, the danger all faded away. There was only the warmth of the fire. Only the sound of breathing. Only the feeling of something new beginning. The bond was no longer just law. It was becoming something more. Something neither of them could deny. The stars stretched across the night sky like endless fireflies. The human sat near the fire, sharpening his blades slowly, though his mind was far away. The days had blended together, walking through ruins, fighting off patrols, sharing food, and watching over the child. What surprised him most was not the danger. It was the warmth. The little girl had begun to smile often, sometimes even laughing as she played with broken pieces of stone or reached for his hand. She no longer looked like a shadow of herself. She was healing. And every time she laughed, he felt something inside him soften. The mother sat across from him. She was silent, her sharp eyes reflecting the fire. She cradled her daughter close, but her gaze was fixed on the human. It was not the stare of an enemy, nor the look of a stranger. It was something deeper. When the child finally drifted into sleep, the woman laid her down gently on a folded cloak. Then she rose, moving closer to the fire. Her presence carried weight, strong and commanding, yet softened by something almost fragile. You do not know the full truth, she said at last. The human lifted his head slowly. Her voice carried a tone he had not heard before, half strength, half trembling. He set his blade aside and gave her his full attention. She stood tall, the flames painting her armor with red light. Her hand rested lightly against her chest, as if steadying her own heart. In my people's law, she continued, saving a child does not only create a bond. It creates a life path. A destiny that cannot be broken. The human frowned, uncertain. A destiny? She nodded. Her eyes locked onto his. Yes. By giving my daughter food, by protecting her with your life, you became more than a savior. You became part of her bloodline. That law cannot be changed. He felt his chest tighten. The words struck deep, heavy with meaning. But before he could answer, she stepped closer. Her voice grew softer, more personal. And it does not stop with the child. By our law, the protector of a daughter becomes the partner of her mother. You are now bound to me. The human's breath caught. The fire crackled loudly, but the world itself seemed to go silent. He stared at her, unable to find words. She did not look away. Her eyes shone, fierce and unyielding, but behind them burned something else. Gratitude. Hope. Fear. And perhaps something more. You must understand, she said, her voice low, almost trembling. This is not a choice. This is who we are. To save a child is to tie your future to the family. You are part of us now. You are mine as I am yours. The human felt his heart pound hard in his chest. He had faced death 1,000 times. He had fought creatures twice his size. He had looked into the eyes of enemies without fear. But this moment was different. This moment frightened him more than any battle. He rose to his feet slowly. His eyes met hers across the firelight. I did not ask for this, he said quietly. I only did what I thought was right. I know, she replied. That is why it matters. That is why it cannot be broken. Her words fell heavy into the night. The fire flickered. The stars seemed to listen. He looked at the sleeping child. Her tiny body curled against the cloak, her glowing eyes closed in peace. He remembered the way she had clung to him when he carried her through the ruins. He remembered the trust in her eyes when she touched his wrist. He remembered her laughter, soft and pure, when she felt safe for the first time. And then he looked back at her mother. She was strong, scarred, and fierce. Yet she stood before him with her heart open, offering not just gratitude, but her life. His throat tightened. He had been alone for so long. A soldier wandering from one war to another. No family. No home. No future. Now this woman was telling him he had both. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. "Why me?" She tilted her head slightly, her eyes softening though her stance remained firm. "Because you chose to protect when no one would have blamed you for walking away. Because you gave without asking anything in return. That is the heart of a partner. That is the heart of a father." The words sank into him like a blade, not of pain, but of truth. His chest ached not from fear, but from something unfamiliar. Something he had locked away for years. The woman lowered her head for a moment, her voice softer than before. "I do not know if you accept it yet. But I will not deny what is already written in our bond. You belong with us." Silence fell again. The fire burned lower, casting shadows across their faces. The human's hand trembled slightly as he placed it on the hilt of his weapon, then let it fall away. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. "I never thought I would belong anywhere again." The woman looked up, her eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and something else, something that glimmered like hope. The human stepped closer to the fire. His eyes stayed locked on hers. "But maybe the universe decided otherwise." Her lips parted slightly. She took a slow breath, as if steadying herself. For the first time, the warrior in her seemed to fade, and only the woman remained. Between them, the bond was no longer only law. It was something alive. Something dangerous. Something beautiful. The child stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, as if reminding them of the truth that had brought them together. The woman finally spoke again, her voice quiet but certain. "Then it begins. From this night we are one." The fire burned low. The stars shone brighter. And the human knew there was no turning back. The night did not last long. Dawn broke with fire on the horizon. The human rose first, his body tense. The air was heavy with the sound of movement. He knew the enemy was close. The alien woman stood beside him, her daughter held firmly in her arms. Her armor caught the rising light, her blade glowing faintly. She looked at him with steady eyes. There was no fear in her face, only determination. "They have found us," she said. The human nodded. He had already felt it, the tremor of boots, the faint hum of machines. The patrol was not small this time. It was an army. The little girl clung to her mother, her glowing eyes wide with worry. She looked at the human too, reaching a tiny hand toward him. He touched her hand briefly, his heart heavy yet steady. "I will protect you," he whispered. The woman placed the child behind a wall of broken stone, safe from the first strike. Then she drew her weapon and looked at the human once more. Their eyes locked. In that gaze, words were unnecessary. They would stand together. The first blast struck the ground, shaking the ruins. Dust filled the air as armored soldiers advanced, their weapons glowing. The human pulled his blade free and moved to the front line. The woman stepped beside him, her stance fierce. The battle began. The human fought with speed and precision. His blade cut through enemies with practiced skill. Each movement was sharp, controlled, deadly. The woman fought like a storm, her strikes powerful, her armor shining as she moved with impossible grace. Side by side, they held the line. The soldiers came in waves, shouting in their harsh language. Energy bolts lit the ruins, striking stone and metal. Sparks filled the air. Smoke curled around them. The human's chest burned with effort, his arms heavy, but he did not stop. The woman's breath came hard, yet she moved with relentless force. Each time one faltered, the other stood strong. Behind them, the child watched with wide eyes, clutching a broken piece of cloth. she whispered softly, almost praying, though no one could hear her words. The fight raged on. The human felt his legs weaken, his weapon nearly torn from his grasp. Then, in the chaos, he heard the woman cry out. She had been struck, a deep cut across her arm. She stumbled, blood staining her armor. Without thinking, he moved to her side, cutting down the soldier who had wounded her. He caught her before she fell. Their eyes met for a single, burning moment. "You cannot fall," he whispered, his voice fierce. "Not now." Her lips curved into a small, pained smile. "Then do not let me." They rose together, back to back, blades flashing once more. The battle pushed them to the edge of strength, but something stronger kept them moving. Not only survival. Not only law. Something deeper. Finally, the soldiers began to falter. Their numbers broke. Those still alive fled into the smoke, retreating from the fire of their resistance. The ruins grew quiet once more. The human dropped to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. The woman fell beside him, her hand pressed against her wound. Blood dripped slowly, but her eyes were still fierce, still alive. The child ran to them, tears streaming down her glowing cheeks. She threw her arms around them both, clinging as if she would never let go. The human wrapped one arm around her, the other steadying the mother. For a long moment, they held each other in silence, the fire of battle still burning in their chests. Then the woman spoke, her voice hoarse but steady. "You have fought beside me. You have stood for my daughter as if she were your own. Now you must answer." The human looked at her, his breath heavy. Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering even through pain. "Will you walk away?" she asked softly. "Or will you accept what has already been written between us?" His throat tightened. He looked at the child, her small hands clutching him, her eyes filled with trust. He looked at the mother, fierce yet vulnerable, offering him not just duty, but a life. For a long moment, he could not speak. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Maybe the universe brought us together for a reason," he said quietly. "I will not walk away." The woman's eyes softened, tears glimmering in the corners. A slow smile touched her lips. She leaned closer, her forehead pressing gently against his. "Then you are mine," she whispered. "And I am yours." The child smiled through her tears, hugging them tighter. The sun rose higher, burning away the smoke. The ruins no longer felt like a graveyard. They felt like the beginning of something new. The human looked at them both, his chest heavy with exhaustion, but also with something stronger. Hope. He had been a soldier, a wanderer, a man with no place. But now, in the ashes of war, he had found a family. And nothing in the universe would take it from him.